All right, hi everybody, and welcome back to another video. So today I want to steal a little bit of an idea from another YouTuber that I really like to watch by the name of Return to Mother Base, and talk about all the games that I beat in June of 2019. So hopefully what I'd like to do is have these monthly what I beat videos cover everything that I did play through in that month, so I kind of have a running kind of live diary of everything I played and a capture of my initial impressions. It'll be helpful come game of the year time when I want to go back and see what my first opinion was on stuff. And personally, I just think it's interesting to go back and see what you thought of a game at the time you played it versus kind of how it ages in your mind as the years go on. There are definitely some games that I played in the past that my opinion of has either drastically improved or gone down a little bit as enough time has gone on, and there have been changes to how games get made, what types of features are prominent, that kind of thing. So yeah, I have, let's see, 7 games I think to go through. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep, 7 games that I beat in July of 2019. And we'll just kind of go chronologically and give my thoughts on each of them. So our first game is Gotto Roboto. This is released towards the beginning of June, and it is a Metroid-style game where you play as a cat in a robot suit. So the gameplay is essentially a Metroid Lite. I mean, this game is pretty short. You can finish it in 3 to 4 hours, and that was me getting everything there is to collect. There's not a ton of optional collectibles, but there are a few of the types of things you'd expect. So like a health upgrade, a missile upgrade, that type of thing. But what makes this game interesting and unique is that you, as the cat, you can exit the robot and run around in cat form. And when you're just controlling the cat, you obviously don't have any weapons. You're pretty much going to die on contact with any enemy. So it becomes sort of an interesting balance of using the robot suit to navigate around the world in the way you'd expect in a Metroid game. And then using the cat suit to kind of like explore vents or little areas that the robot suit couldn't fit into, and kind of go back and forth like that. The graphics are set up to look, I think it's kind of trying to emulate that original Game Boy style. Everything's black and white, and it's pretty low res pixel art. But yeah, I mean, for what it is, if you're in the mood for a Metroid-like game, it was like, it's a great palate cleanser type game. You're not going to be in a bad mood playing this game. And I don't think it's too expensive. If I recall correctly, it's a Devolver Digital published game. And yeah, definitely if you find it on a sale or anything, or if you're just in the mood for kind of a non-committal Metroid game, I think this is a good one. The next game I finished, also a downloadable game on the Switch, although it didn't originate on the Switch. That is Downwell. So Downwell is essentially a roguelike, or maybe a roguelite. I'm not 100% sure how to use that term. But it's a roguelike in that you start every run of the game at essentially no skills, no abilities, no weapons, that type of thing. And as you progress and play through it more, you kind of after every stage will unlock either a new power-up or a new ability. And then during the stages, you can find different weapons. The gameplay itself is you control a character who has boots that shoot bullets down. You jump down into a well, and you're essentially trying to get to the bottom of this well using those boots to both shoot enemies and do a little bit of light platforming. So you can kind of shoot bullets down to hover in place, and you can bounce off of the tops of enemies, or you can shoot enemies to go through them, and essentially try to reach the bottom, which would be the final stage. It's split up into different levels, and after each kind of group of levels, there's a boss fight. And it's really good at being that, oh, I only have 10 minutes, I only have 15 minutes to play a game type of experience. Every run is really short. Levels themselves individually don't take more than a minute. And when I was able to successfully go through and complete an entire run, I don't think it took me more than 20 minutes, maybe 25. So even a fully completed run, which you're very unlikely to get, at least when you first start out, isn't going to take that long. There's also some interesting mechanics around chaining how you bounce off of or destroy enemies without actually touching any of the platforms or any of the ground within the well. So if you're able to fall down the well and kind of bounce off of a set number of enemies, when you land, you'll get extra gems, you'll get some extra health, some extra ammo for your weapons, stuff like that, which will then make you more powerful, and then you can use those gems to go to a shop and buy even more upgrades, which will continue to improve your character. The upgrades are pretty cool. There's not as many upgrades as I would have liked, but so in that, most of your runs, you'll see a lot of the same upgrades, and by the time you get to the end of a run, I don't know how many there are total, but it feels like you've gotten essentially maybe 2/3 of the upgrades on your character, so there's actually not that many that you even leave on the table, but that might not actually be the case. It might just be that I saw the same ones a lot. But it did take me a good number of tries to actually finally get through a completed run. So yeah, it's very cheap. I think it was on sale for like a couple dollars. Originally, this was an iOS game, and I think it's been on Steam for a while too. This game came out back in 2014, 2015 somewhere. But if you want a good pick up and play game and an interesting introduction to roguelikes, Downwell is pretty fun. Next up is a PlayStation VR game, and one that I've been meaning to get around to for a long time, and that is Static. This game, it's hard to describe it without referencing other games, I feel like, but we'll do our best. So if you have played this other game, if you've played the game Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes, this is very similar to the concept of that game. And if you've never played that game before, essentially, in Static, you're sitting in a chair in first person in VR, and attached to your hands is a box which has puzzles on every side. So you might look at the front of it and there'll be kind of a sliding tile puzzle, and then on one side there might be levers that you can push and pull that you don't know what exactly they do, and you're essentially just trying to get through all the puzzles on this box to progress through the next area. Or to the next box or the next stage or whatever you want to call it. The game does some really interesting things. It plays with VR very well, in that sometimes the solution to the puzzle is more than just what you can see on the box that your hands are locked into. There are times where audio around you or the environment you're in all becomes relevant to solving these puzzles, which makes it really interesting and cool. And the story sort of has a kind of a more sinister Portal vibe. It's almost like a halfway point between the comedy of Portal and the more like serious tone of something like Inside or Limbo. It exists between those two. It's Portal-like in that you're essentially a research subject in a test facility. And there are some jokes, but then there's also some more serious bits to the story too. Not a super heavy story and not a super long game, but a really cool VR game, and one that I think has started going on sale pretty often. It's been out for a few years, so it's definitely in some of my more highly rated VR games or PlayStation VR games. So check out Static. I think you'll probably dig it. I know I dug it. All right, so here's the big one. This game came out this month and I played all the way through it and absolutely fell in love. That is Outer Wilds. I cannot say enough positive things about Outer Wilds. This is the first game that I've been just 100% addicted to, 100% like all consuming of my thoughts since probably The Witness. To set up sort of the general concept of Outer Wilds, you play as this particular alien race, and you're a member of a space exploration academy, essentially. And it is the day before your first launch. And so you take your spaceship, you launch into space, and you just have the entire solar system to explore. The game at first will kind of nudge you towards going to the moon of your planet to learn a little bit more about the mechanics in the world, but you are 100% free to explore any planet in the solar system, fly anywhere in space. It's all completely seamless. You can land on planets, you can land on other moons, all kinds of stuff, and essentially just unravel kind of everything there is to know about this universe. You have no idea even what the objective of the game is when you first start, other than, hey, go explore. But what the game does really effectively is it kind of drip feeds you all these little mysteries that you want to learn more about. So you might land on a planet and discover some artifacts from an extinct civilization that imply to you that something catastrophic happened, or you might discover some weird quantum science related mystery that you need to do some research to figure more out. And as you explore these different worlds, you sort of start to piece together the different elements of these mysteries, and the world starts to become this kind of like exciting, breathing, living clockwork thing that continues to encourage you to explore. And you do sort of unravel a couple of core central mysteries that lead you to an ultimate endpoint in the game, but it's really up to you to decide what you want to do, where you want to go, and what you're most interested in. On top of that, the game has a really cool Groundhog Day mechanic where essentially 22 minutes after you launch into space, the sun goes supernova and the solar system is destroyed. When that happens, it rewinds time back to right before you launched. You keep all the information you learned, and you get to set out and explore and do something again. So that does a couple things that I think are really beneficial to this game. One, it creates this sort of sense of urgency. You want to make sure you're going to the next place to learn something new. You want to make sure that you are focusing on the task at hand for whatever task you've decided on. And then two, it allows this whole world to never need to teach you like a new skill. You never unlock new abilities, things like that. 100% the tools of your world is the knowledge you've learned through these different repeated attempts. So you could, if you knew everything there is to know about the game, from the moment you start this game, you could immediately go follow sort of the critical path to see the ending within the first 22 minutes. Now, you'll never be able to because there's so much to explore and so much to learn, but you could, because the game's tools that it gives you is just an understanding of how this world works. The game looks great. It controls pretty well. The controls for the spaceship are sort of actual thrusting type controls, so you need to manage the three-dimensional axes. You'll both fly forward and back, but also up and down, so it takes a little bit to learn those. And the music in this game is just phenomenal. It's simple, but so effective. It does an excellent job setting the mood. In particular, the song that plays before the sun is about to go supernova in any particular run is sort of this just somber, soft, quiet, melancholy piece. Very simple melody, only a couple of notes, but it does a really good job of making you kind of sad that this universe is about to die, but also kind of like optimistic at how far you've come, and knowing that you have another loop to try again makes it so that you aren't really stressed or upset. What I love about games, almost more than anything I'm learning, is I love games that teach you through play and force you, not even force is too strong of a word, but that teach you through play and allow your understanding of the game and its world and its mechanics to be your primary resource. So I fell in love with this game. I think it is one of the best games I've played in years. I can't say enough good things about it. Please, if you have any interest, check out Outer Wilds. For those that have an Xbox One, it is on Game Pass. And so you can get a Game Pass free trial most months for $1 and play this game for $1. It won't take you more than a month to beat. So yeah, there's a million little stories, little things I could tell you. I could go into detail about all the different planets and all the cool things that you discover on them. But I want to leave as much of the mysteries unspoken, because the sense of discovery that you get is really the valuable part of this game. So if you're interested, check out a couple of gameplay videos, at least to get like a feel for what the game looks like and generally kind of what the planets are like. But yeah, do yourself a favor and check out Outer Wilds. It is so good. All right, the next game that I finished up is Cadence of Hyrule. I bought and finished it in a couple of days. I actually never played Crypt of the Necrodancer before, so this was pretty new to me. And I was surprised at how much of a Zelda game it was. I sort of expected it to be kind of an endless thing where it just sort of is Crypt of the Necrodancer with Zelda window dressing, but it's much more of a kind of a Link to the Past sequel, but with Crypt of the Necrodancer mechanics. And you can actually turn off the music portion of the Crypt of the Necrodancer mechanics, and then you're essentially just playing a Zelda game that's turn-based. But for anyone that's not familiar with Crypt of the Necrodancer, there's a constant music playing, and to the beat of the music, you take your actions. So you hop squares to the beat of the music, or you attack enemies to the beat of the music. And every time you move on the beat, the enemy moves on the beat. So there's a little bit of kind of tile-based strategy in terms of getting to the enemy in time with the music as they're getting to you, or approaching an enemy from the right angle, or using different weapons, or the different Zelda power-ups to defeat the bosses or the enemies or things like that. And then on top of that, it's a pretty typical Zelda game. So you're going to different dungeons, getting these mythical instruments to ultimately go beat the big bad. Some of the enemy designs in this game are really good. The bosses in particular have a lot of good puns that relate to instruments. So the one that I will give away is you fight Goma, and Goma is holding maracas. And so the boss's name is Gomaracas. And that type of sort of silly attitude is pretty common throughout the entire game. So, yeah, I think this has me interested to go check out Crypt of the Necrodancer. I mean, I was in the past, but I just had never gotten around to it. But I think Cadence of Hyrule is a pretty solid kind of side story to the Zelda games. And I know that you do unlock some extra stuff after you finish the game. And there's more in the world that I could have explored and found. So I think I'll probably go back to it a little bit at some point, a couple times throughout the year. Yeah, I mean, you don't even use all of the Zelda items like bow and arrow, boomerang, all that stuff. A lot of those are sort of optional finds. So you could finish the game with only kind of half your kit, which means that there's a lot of different ways you can play it and a lot of different options you have to re-explore. Plus, you have the ability, once you've beaten the game, to sort of roll a random seed that rearranges all the tiles of the world map in a certain way. So you can play the game again and it'll be sort of a fresh take. I think you unlock that when you beat the game. That might be available right away. I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, I definitely liked Cadence of Hyrule. All right. Next up is Typing of the Dead. And I didn't actually play this for Dreamcast like you might expect. A couple of days ago, I guess it was more than that at this point, a week or two ago, I was at a town about an hour and a half away from where I live, attending a convention with my girlfriend. And she was off doing some stuff in the convention, and so I had a little bit of time to wander and roam the city. And I came across a retro game store / arcade. And after poking around the game store a little bit, I walked into their arcade, and it turns out everything was on free play. And one of the things they had there was a mock stand-up arcade for Typing of the Dead. So it was just an arcade cab that they had bolted a keyboard and a monitor to, and I don't know if underneath, I think it was running the PC version of Typing of the Dead. But I couldn't say no for free. So I stood there and played all the way through Typing of the Dead on a stand-up arcade. Not my first time playing the game, but it is my first time playing all the way through the game. And Typing of the Dead's hilarious. So this is a House of the Dead game, in that it has the look and feel of a gun con game where you're shooting at the screen. But rather than shoot at the screen with a gun, zombies pop up and have words printed across their chest, and you have to type in the words. And so it's sort of halfway between a House of the Dead game and those old typing or teach me typing programs that we had growing up in elementary school, or at least that I had growing up in elementary school when I learned to type in 4th grade or something like that. And yeah, the game is silly. It's not too long of a beat. You can get all the way through it in about an hour. And it's just classic goofy fun. The phrases that they have you type are so funny. They're essentially having you type gibberish, but then sometimes the levels will be themed around a certain thing. So they might be themed around like your office job or relationships or whatever it might be. And yeah, they do a very good job of making the things you need to type unexpected and goofy. I actually have the Dreamcast keyboard, but I don't have the original copy of the Dreamcast version. And now I'm sort of on the hunt because I'd like to play through it on the harder modes and check it out. And finally, I don't have it on me, I don't think. Nope. But the last game, the game that everybody's been playing this last month, is Bloodstained, Ritual of the Night. I was a Kickstarter backer for Bloodstained, and so my Kickstarter copy finally came. I think the extras are going to be a little bit delayed, but at least I have the game to play through. And I backed the PS4 version. Actually, originally I backed the Vita version, but it got canceled, so I ended up with the PS4 version. And yeah, so for anyone that's not aware, Bloodstained is essentially the modern Symphony of the Night. This is made by Koji Igarashi and is the spiritual successor in everything but name to Symphony of the Night. Mechanically, it plays almost identical, down to really minor details. Things like the map and the layout and the save rooms, the different weapons that you find. There being a huge variety of weapons that have sort of Street Fighter style input special attacks, little mechanical things about like you can attack and then cancel that with a backdash and then cancel your backdash with another attack. The move speed is lined up to be identical to Symphony of the Night, and a lot of the monster designs look very similar to Symphony of the Night monsters because the monster designer, at least in part, was by one of the old members of the Symphony of the Night team. And as much as this game wants to be a Symphony of the Night game, I think it just comes out, or a new Symphony of the Night. I think that this game really just turns out to be pretty good. Something about it did not have that timeless, like, amazing feeling to me that Symphony of the Night did. And I'm not sure exactly what it is. Some of it was there's a little bit of, I can't think of a better term than lack of polish, but some of the animations looked pretty weird, especially some of the animations around the characters when they speak look kind of like a PS2 game, like a late era PS2 game, maybe launch PS3. And it's hard to describe, but something in my hands didn't feel quite right at times. Even though most of the time the game controls very well, it's almost like it controls well, but then it doesn't always look like it matches up to what you're controlling. Hard to describe. And I think it would really be a personal preference thing. So that's not to say that this is a bad game at all. It's not a bad game. It is a good game. I mean, this is certainly better than other Kickstarter games have been. Things like Mighty Number 9 didn't deliver in the way that this one does, but I still think it leaves a little bit to be desired. That said, I was still pretty addicted to playing it, and I still liked it a lot. And I don't mean to stand here and just kind of criticize the things I don't like about it, but I think that this would have been better served without all the comparisons to Symphony of the Night. Because as its own game, it is pretty fun. It's hard to call it its own game because of what it's trying to be, but it is a pretty solid Metroid Castlevania clone. I guess you don't need to say Metroid, it's just a Castlevania clone. But it's just not next level. I think anyone that picks it up, though, they're going to have a good time if they're a fan of this genre at all. If you were a fan of Symphony of the Night before, this will certainly not disappoint you. It just won't maybe floor you. And I would even recommend it to people. Like I said, it's a very solid game. It's just one that I'd end up giving like an 8.5 to. And it has some pretty awesome mechanics towards the end of the game. I will say that. Some of the movement and exploration mechanics that you find make the castle really fun to explore. So really, if you first start it and you're not super into it, push through a little bit into a couple hours, and I think the game does really pick up. So yeah, that is everything that I finished in the month of June 2019. Pretty solid list of games. I would definitely say that the highlight for me personally was Outer Wilds, but Bloodstained was pretty fun to play through too. And what's exciting about things like Bloodstained is everyone is sort of playing it all at once, and so it has this kind of gaming community vibe where you can talk to anyone and they probably have an opinion on it because it's so pervasive across all different avenues of conversation, which is cool. But yeah, I would love to know what anybody else was playing through and what they beat in June, so please feel free to let me know. And if not, until next time, I will see you in another video. Thanks.